Hello and welcome to Careers Talks Live with Max from the Young Project at Trent Community Trust. And today we are lucky enough to have Emma Young with us from Nottingham Building Society. How are you doing, Emma?
Fine, thank you, yourself.
Yeah, very good. Thank you very
Good.
much. So I think we should start this off, take it back to basics. What is your job title and what does your role entail?
Okay, my job title is Senior Financial Crime Manager. What that means is, so within the sort of financial sector, you have three levels of defence against criminal activity. So the first level of defence is generally the people who speak to customers, so the people at the branch, people on the telephone call, and they are the first line of defence because they're the ones who are speaking to the customers. So they might be getting concerns around how they're behaving, what they say, and they're the ones that then stand back and go, I'm not happy about this, I need to do something about it. And all those people have a responsibility to report their concerns on what we call in the industry a SAR. That stands for Suspicious Activity Report. And once they put down on their concerns, that then goes to the first line crime department who investigate those concerns. Where I sit is in second line financial crime. So what that means is that after first line have done their investigations, we then agree if it should be reported to the police or not. As well as looking at those SARs, we are responsible for making sure the society adheres to regulations and laws within the financial crime sector. So we have money laundering laws, we have terrorist laws, we have fraud regulations. So there's all these factors that we have to be aware of and make sure the society adheres to them. Otherwise, we can get fined and ultimately shut down. We also have a third line of defence, which is basically our audit department. So audit is responsible for checking the whole society is doing what they should be doing. So they check us and they check first line and everybody to make sure they are adhering to the rules and regulations. So on a day-to-day basis, my job, like I said, is looking at the suspicious activities that comes up, looking at ways to improve service within financial crime, looking at external companies. There's a company out there which could help us stop criminals better, and making sure we adhere to the rules and regulations. We are also there to offer advice to different departments who may have concerns or want to change something. We sit on a number of projects going on. So when the society is introducing something new, we have to make sure financial crime is thought of and we still adhere to it. And I also sit on some committees, so we might report to the board and high-level people, just telling them what's happening in the financial crime world. So that in a few minutes is probably roughly what I do on a day-to-day basis.
Awesome. I think that's a very clear summary. So, I mean, maybe just because I'm interested as well, like how long does an investigation take? I mean, obviously it will depend on what it is.
Yeah.
But like, what's a kind of typical length of an investigation? And I know you said like you kind of determine whether it needs to be passed on further or whether it needs to be dealt with. But how do you kind of go from basic investigation and at what stage do you kind of intervene as well?
Yep. So, like you said, it can depend on the situation. So, when a suspicious activity report comes through, first line will review everything. So they'll review what we know about the customer through our systems. A lot of people, when they open an account, might be asked what we call KYC information. So that's know your customer. So you might be asked what you do for a living, how you're going to be using your account, etc. Because those sort of things are important with our investigations. So I would say generally it can take a fair few hours to do the investigation. Obviously, we have access to social media and the internet, so the things on there that can be investigated, and then the team will then write up their investigation and they will say that they recommend it to be reported to the police or not, and then we will then pick up that investigation, we will reread it and we will say yes or no, and then we will report it. So we generally report to what's called the NCA, which is the National Criminal
Agency.
Thank you. I found my totally blank there. What does it stand for? So basically, all those information gets piled in one database and feeds to the police. So the police might dip in and out and say, I've got concerns about this person, have they been reported before? And all that information is on there. Also, when other institutions put in their cases, if there's quite a few about one customer, then the police will then investigate that. We also report our terrorism concerns through there, and of course they will get picked up straight away. So with the London bridge bombings, a lot of the societies and banks were involved because we hold that financial information. So we will then help the police and investigators that way to determine how they are using their money, where they might be using it, and the police can be there a lot quicker and understand how they did what they did. So we are very valuable to the police for information like that. We often get court orders and things from the police where they ask us for information to help with their investigation. So it may be that we've got no concerns, but actually the police have got concerns. We often also get asked for CCTV as well, which helps the police with their investigations as well. So I would say the branch might report it on day one, the first line department might investigate it day 2 and 3, and then get reported to us, and then we will report it to the relevant area. So it will probably take a week or two, and then we may never hear anything again, which means either it's just getting filed for information, or there are no concerns when the police have done their investigation, or we will then hear further when we get a court order and they ask us for more information. We also had fraud investigations, so we might have applications with fraudulent documents, which might take a bit more digging. So it can take anything from a few hours to a few days to a week, depending on how hard and where our investigation goes to in the case.
I bet that keeps it interesting. And like, it's funny that you mentioned about court there, because that relates directly to a question that we've had in the chat, which is, do you have to go to court in your job, and if so, what is it like?
Yes, we do. It's very rare we do get asked to go to court, because generally all we're supplying is copies of a computer record. So we will be asked for transactions and we will send those transactions. And so it's very rare. In my career of around nearly 20 years, I think I've gone to court 3 times, and 2 of those were thrown out. So often the defence will call everybody that they need to, because it helps with their case. And when we all turn up, actually the person that's been charged will look at it and go, you know what, I'm not going to get away with this. I'll just plead guilty now and get a light sentence. So 2 of those cases have been thrown out. But yes, I have had to turn one before. What it involves is very little from our stance. We're literally just standing there and saying this information was pulled off our system. There was no computer error, and it is accurate at the time we pulled it off. Our manager is an ex-police officer, and obviously he's dealt with courts a lot more and can get a lot more grilling. But from our side, it's very rare we get caught, and if we do, it involves very little work. But it is interesting to see what happens with the case.
Yeah, I was going to say, not many people get to experience that. So I guess that's quite like a unique aspect. But as you say, not many people get to experience that. And I guess that kind of brings on to the next question, which is about like how you got to where you are today, because you're a senior, aren't you? So you're a senior financial
crime manager.
That's the one. So you can't just kind of walk into that job, do you? Like, what was your kind of route in? Like, did you kind of progress through and work your way up, or how did that kind of work?
Yeah, my first experience in the financial crime sector was working at a credit card company which no longer exists, called Egg. And that was the first time I got in the financial sector. So to understand how the financial sector works, how does a bank account work, how do mortgages work. I hadn't any experience really. I had a bank account, but didn't really know how they worked. So from that side, that started me on the process. I then went to my first building society, Derbyshire Building Society, as a cashier in a branch. So again, I understood about savings accounts, got to deal with customers, understand about the reasons for getting identification, looking at transactions, dealing in cash, which I hadn't had any experience of. Then I decided to do a qualification, which is an engineering qualification to do with advising customers on mortgages. So if you ever want a mortgage and you don't know really what product you want, you then have to speak to an advisor who's been trained to understand your needs and advise on that product. After that, the society used to have what we call a champion in each branch. So that champion was trained specifically in the money laundering side of the company. So we would become experienced in looking for fake identification. What identification do you need? What is a suspicious activity? What should we be questioning? How should we be questioning people? So I was a champion for the branch I worked at. And from there, I then worked very closely with the financial crime department, dealing with lots of queries and training, etc. So when a job came up in the financial crime department, I went for it and was lucky to get it. And that started me on the platform of being in financial crime. So I was taught on how to do the investigations, what the rules and regs are, why we have to adhere to it. And then basically I've progressed from there. So I worked at Derbyshire Building Society for 10 years. And then unfortunately they got taken over by another society and were made redundant. So I then took that opportunity as some experience to get experience elsewhere. So I worked at a solicitor's for a few months as a contractor, getting experience at that side of the world. I then worked for a pension company as well, so I got experience with that side of the world. I then worked for a Sharia bank, which is very interesting. So for those that don't know, people of certain religions aren't allowed to get interest on their savings, or not allowed to pay interest on their mortgage. Yeah, it's against their religion. It's a way of, they feel it is betting. You are betting that you're going to get that interest. So in their religion, they're not allowed it. So special banks are set up specifically to not give interest, but instead they give profit. So whereas generally banks will get people's money and they might invest it on the stock market, the bank I worked at invested it in products. So they might buy paintings and things, and then those paintings would increase in value, and that value would then be given back to the customers as profit. So it's a whole different way of learning, and really interesting.
I never knew that existed.
That's it. I knew about it from learning, but never experienced it. So it was very interesting. So it's good learning curve. And they were the first institution I worked at as well that had a current account. So there's lots more fraud going on current accounts. So that was really interesting as well. And then from there, because of my experience, I was able to go for and got a job as a manager at the Building Society, managing the financial crime team, which was really good. I've not had management experience before. And then from there, when this role came up as a senior manager, it seemed the next step up. And because I built up that experience, I was able to apply for it and lucky enough to get it.
Excellent. So we have another question in the chat which says, did you do a lot of your training through the Building Society rather than college or university?
Yes, I didn't go to college or university. No, beg your pardon, I did go to college. I actually did graphic design at college when I left school at 16. I didn't go to university. I was never that mind-wise. I've never got hard-hitting exams like you guys are. So I decided my best opportunity was to do something I enjoyed, which is why I did graphic design, and I was working at the same time. So I wanted to get my foot on the career ladder straight away. So at the time I was working at Marks and Spencer's, and then progressed to the bank. So I never sought qualifications for this job. I didn't even know this job existed at the time. I'd never heard of it. People working in banks, you were thinking of people down in Canary Wharf, never something that entered my mind until I went for the job at Egg. Qualifications, yes, I have done them in-house. I've been very lucky that the places I've worked have paid for the qualifications. There are industry-wide qualifications run by a company called the ICA, which is the International Compliance Association. They do certificates and diplomas in money laundering, fraud, compliance, KYC, which is to do with your know your customers and identification. All that sort of industry that I work in, they do the qualifications. There are people I've known in the industry that have done them off their own back to get where they are today. But I was lucky enough that my companies were able to pay for that, and I do now have advanced certificates in money laundering and crime prevention, fraud prevention as well.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I guess I'm kind of interested. Where do you get those qualifications from? So like if someone was looking into getting into this sort of industry, where do people go about getting those sort of qualifications from?
Well, they can do them off their own back through the ICA, but I would always say to get into this area, the experience you need probably counts just as much, if not sometimes more, than the qualification, because having that experience of working in the financial sector helps you understand what is the norm and what is a suspicion. And working in the sector as well, you will get training on identifying suspicious activity and what to do and what the rules and regulations are. So that is always very good. We don't just have our kind of people in financial sector. So even Gambling institutions will have this sort of area, utility companies, insurance companies. So it's not just a bank or building society that has that, there are other areas as well. And each of those people are specialised in their area. So, for example, at my level, I couldn't go and walk into an insurance company and do the same job because their risks and suspicions are totally different to what ours are. And it's the same with the gambling company. I won't really have much idea. I have basic but not in-depth knowledge. So working in the different areas is useful to get that different experience, but don't just think that a bank and building society has our sort of career. There are others out there that will be able to go down that line.
Yeah, but I think as well, like with any kind of financial institution or any kind of organization of that type, you're going to get crime that's going to happen there. So even if you're not working in financial crime or anything like that, you will still need to be trained, or you will receive some training on that, because like, for example, if someone comes into a bank branch, tries to rob the place or whatever, you're going to have some training on that, on how to deal with that situation.
Yeah.
And
let them have it, basically. Let them have the money.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, this is not a training course right here, but but yeah. So I guess you've kind of mentioned this earlier on, but what does like a typical day look like for you?
Generally, when I log on in the morning, is looking at the email. So we have a centralised financial crime inbox, which we look at. We also have our own inboxes, so it's looking through the emails, what's been happening while I've not been logged on, anything I need to deal with. Often people are asking for advice and questions, so it's dealing with those. Then I'm involved in a number of projects, so I might be doing some work on that. Then we might get a suspicious activity through, which I'll then work on. We might get then some in-depth queries, which I have to liaise with other areas and work with other people to come to decisions on. I've been on a number of calls today about a number of different issues.
Different every day, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, we also, just thinking about it, we also, as well as looking at financial crime from the customer side, we also have to look at it from an insider side. So we also deal with bribery and corruption and insider fraud. So there are various things. So, you know, we don't want staff to conduct crime in the society. So we're trying to protect against that. We have to make sure people are accepting gifts in genuine reason and they're not being bribed another way. So are you allowing that customer to have a different product to somebody else because they've given you a box of chocolates? You know, we have all those things as well that we're involved in. We also look at conflicts. So are you working at one of our competitors on a Saturday? That means, you know, you could be passing information. So there's those sort of things we look at as well. So we might get reports involving those. And we also work with our HR department when they onboard staff members to make sure we're onboarding the right people from a financial crime side. So I can be involved in anything like that throughout the day. So no day's the same, which is really good. So it's not boring. And you can be sitting there quite quiet, plodding along, and suddenly something could come in and everything gets pushed to one side and you have to work on that one thing. So that's what keeps us on our toes. That's what's very interesting.
I guess it's good because like you get to work with such a range of people and you're kind of involved with throughout the business. Like some jobs you're just stuck within that one department, whereas because financial crime covers everywhere, like every single employee could be involved in financial crime, every single person could be involved in financial crime. You get to deal with a wide range of people, which I guess must be quite good as well.
That is, and we're quite lucky because we are a building society and quite a small or medium-sized building society. We do have our toes in a lot of different areas. So if I went to Barclays, for example, my role will probably be one part of the role I do now because they have such a massive business that someone like me couldn't have their feet in all these areas because they just couldn't cope. You know, there's too much work, so they will just be doing one part of the job. So they might just look at suspicious activity reports day in, day out, whereas we have a varied role. So that's something I really enjoy, the fact that our role is varied, whereas in a bigger institution it's more refined. They are more perhaps experts in that area because that's all they do, but I do enjoy the fact that we do get involved in lots of areas and work with lots of people.
Awesome. So what would you say was like the biggest factor that's helped you in your kind of career so far, the biggest thing that's, you know, driven you to get to where you are today?
the biggest factor for me getting where I am, I would say, is experience, working my way from the ground up, so to speak, understanding the industry from the bottom, so I get to know the full ins and outs of how it works. What's helped me personally is probably just perseverance. I've always, like you were saying at the beginning of the call, I've always been interested in sort of crime and catching criminals and what it involves. And I actually did apply for the police when I was 18, and unfortunately failed the physical by one point. I was very disappointed. So I've always been involved in that sort of side. So when I heard about this area, straight away, it was my decision to go, right, I'm going to get in that area, and what do I need to do to get to that area? And, speaking to colleagues and people that work in that area to find out, a bit like here, how did you get in the job? What do you do? What do you recommend? So I would say perseverance and asking questions, asking people, what do they do? What can I do?
And another question from the chat. Do you ever leave the office to visit people or other branches in your job?
People know we don't tend to go and see customers. It's not part of our role. If we require further information from a customer for an investigation, we will generally get the branch or the contact centre to phone that person. We don't tend to go out. That's not part of our role. Sorry, what was the other part?
Or other branches.
Oh, the branches, yes. So we will go to branches generally to give them training. So we won't generally go to a branch to complete an investigation. Part of our regulations is we have to be careful we don't tip anybody off. So when a branch sends a suspicious activity through, we can't go then telling that person, you're going to be investigated. So we try and keep the staff, the branch staff, involved as little as we can, because we don't want them accidentally to say something. So we don't tend to involve the branch once they've sent their SAR. We don't really involve them anymore unless we want any information. But we will go and visit branches quite a bit to do some training. So if there's a new regulation come out, we will go over and explain why we might be asking for something different. If we have a new procedure coming in, we will often go and visit, or we will do something like this, a video conference call, or we will design a training package for them. So we do tend to visit branches, but it's not that often. It's probably just as and when important things come up.
Excellent. So for the guys in the chat, is there any kind of tips or advice that you could give them if they wanted to kind of get into this profession?
Yeah, I would certainly say if it's a financial sector you want to get into, then working at a branch or a call centre that involves the financial side is very, very good, because the basis of understanding how things work is very useful. So like I said, I didn't have a mortgage when I first started in this role. I didn't know how they work, didn't really know what they are. So as soon as you get in that world, they will give you that training, give you that basic information. So straight away, that's useful. Then you can understand how it works when you work there. So spending that time with customers and transactions and being trained yourself on what to look for is then very, very useful. So I'd say any sector, if you wanted to go into the gambling world, go to a gambling shop and get experience there to understand how the system works. And then again, once you're in there, it's speaking to the people who do the role and find out, okay, I'd love to work where you are. What can I do internally to get there? And they will, normally I found them very, very helpful, and they will give you some hints and tips. And the downside is we are a very niche market, so these jobs may not come up that often. If you imagine how many branches are out there with staff there compared to the financial crime people that are working, it's probably not as big. But again, having your foot in that door already gives you that advantage straight away.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think we mentioned it on one of the previous kind of episodes about like going into, even if you want to go into a specific role or a specific industry or whatever, if you can get experience within that organization, and then you can maybe wait until the right role comes up and then you can apply for it and try and change, because like, one, you're more likely to get the job if you are internal, because you know about the procedures and you know about the processes and you know that company. But two, you're also getting experience in the sector that you want. So just because, like, say if you wanted to go into financial crime, if there's no financial crime roles available at that time, think about which institutions and which organizations currently have that department, and see if there's any other roles which you think, oh, that might be okay in the meantime, sort of thing. Because equally, you might kind of do it and you find actually that was amazing. Like I want to kind of pursue this a bit even further. So I think maybe the message here, one is as you said, to ask people, but two, don't be afraid of trying new things and getting yourself out there and just applying for something, because you never know where it'll take you.
Definitely, and most institutions I've worked at will often have like open days for staff where different people from different departments can be had a chat to. And just like you said, you may actually want to work in financial crime, but you may speak to somebody in marketing, and you might think, well, actually that's really good. I'd much rather work there than financial crime, and you go down that line. So yeah, definitely. And like I said, a lot of the financial crime teams are quite open to talking to people. And in my previous roles, we've often had people come and sit with us for a few hours in a day and just go through what we do on a daily basis, to give them a bit more idea as to actually this is something I really want to do, or actually I don't think it's as interesting as I thought. And yeah, definitely, if the job doesn't come up now, it can do eventually, and you can build your career up another way. So like I said, I became a mortgage advisor at first, just to get experience that way and really understand the mortgages as well, and then I made that jump from there. So yeah, definitely. And I think getting experience in those different sectors is always good. And yeah, you're right, for a junior role in the financial crime department, someone that's working in the company and knowing how they work and knowing the systems always gives you that bit of an advantage.
Absolutely. So on the other side of one of the questions we asked earlier, what was the biggest obstacle that you've faced in kind of getting to where you are today? I mean, I had someone say that they hadn't had any obstacles, so they've clearly had a fairly okay path. But and was there anything which kind of majorly faced you or stopped you, and like how did you deal with that situation?
I think I hinted before, it is a very niche market. So I suppose one of the advantages, I didn't really know about it until I started in the financial sector. And once I did, it took me about 4 or 5 years to get into the financial crime team, because it is a very niche market and the jobs don't necessarily come up because people do enjoy what they do and don't necessarily move up or out. So it is a very niche market. How I overcome that, I think that again, it's just literally persistence. So speaking to people, getting bored, asking them all the time, and as soon as anything comes up that's financial crime related, I was always got my hand up and yeah, I'll do that. And as soon as you get that experience, it can then help you when that job does come up. Again, I suppose the only other obstacle is things change so quick. So you might have a financial crime team of 30 people and jobs are coming up every other week. Suddenly that financial crime team might reduce to 20 people, and then you never see that job coming up. But don't be afraid to go outside the company. If you've been working for a company for a few years and nothing's coming up, and you see something coming up elsewhere, I would say go for it, because just because you've worked somewhere for a few years doesn't mean you have to stay there. If you see something coming up and it's a career move and it's for the best, then go for it. Financial crime sectors are open to looking for people outside of the company, and it's always good to push yourself and go for these things. And I always think at the end of the day, it's experience. If unfortunately you didn't get it, you will get that feedback as to why, and you can learn on that and think, right, I will make sure I have that next time I go for that job.
Perfect. So I've got a couple more questions, and then obviously if anyone else has questions, then by all means put them in the chat and we'll get them answered for you. But if you had to do anything again, would you change anything? And if so, what would you change?
To be honest, no. I've enjoyed my career. I've enjoyed how I've got here. I think I went about it the right way. Like I said, I've been lucky enough to get the qualifications through work. When I first started out, they didn't really exist because I've been here that long. The regulations and laws have changed while I've been working, so things weren't around as much. So we hadn't heard of terrorism really till 9/11 came along. So all that training has been while I've been working. So I wouldn't really change the way I've gone. I was, like I said before, I think that as advice for people is to get in the sector you want to work at and get experience, even if it's from the bottom and work your way up. I think that not having that becomes a blocker if you do want to go for it. But I wouldn't change anything.
Absolutely. That's good. You know, yeah, you're all happy with where you've been and how you got there. That's great. So the last question from me is, what is the most important lesson that you've learned so far in your career?
I would say communication. So if we feel that because of a regulation we have to change the way a company works, it's how you communicate that with others. We don't just go barging in and going, right, everybody needs to do it our way or it's highway. We have to communicate with people on how to get that done, and that's been a massive learning experience. When I first worked in the industry at around 20 years old, obviously I didn't really know that sort of thing, and I'm now in my early 40s and I've had massive experience, and I communicate daily with branch staff and contact people right the way up to board and senior management. So obviously your communication skills have to change depending who you speak to. And the other thing I found really useful and learnt is liaising with other bank and building societies. So I'm lucky enough to sit on a financial crime panel where people like myself from different building societies all get together once a quarter, and we talk about how we are doing things. If new regulations come out, how are you doing it? Oh, I like that idea, I don't like that idea. And from that you learn different things as well, which I think is very useful. So it is having good bonds with people and improving your communication skills to match your audience.
Absolutely. I think that's a valuable skill wherever you go, whatever industry you end up in.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think it's something that you learn, isn't it? You know,
Mm-hmm.
depending on it's just the experience at the end of the day. Like the more opportunities that you have to speak to people of various ages, levels, backgrounds, the better that you're going to get at it ultimately. Even if
Definitely.
you think now like, oh, I'm not very good at that, I need to improve on this. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if you throw yourself out there and get involved in it, the more
Yeah.
experience you have, the better that you'll get at it, and you should, in theory, improve over time. There's, you know, so yeah, I agree with you there. I think that's a really important point to mention.
I agree. And I remember when I first worked at Egg on the phones, I was terrified to take that first phone call, and you know, when the customer first complains, you feel awful, but you're right, you do learn from those things and you learn how to improve. You know, sometimes your management will say, if you did it this way, that might get a better outcome. So you learn from that. You learn from your mistakes. You know, you might send someone an email and they might take it the wrong way and not be very nice to you. And it's just how you then deal with that and learn from your mistakes next time. I totally agree. It is all about experience, and unfortunately, it's not something you can be taught straight away. You just improve over time and learn from your mistakes.
Yeah, I think actually as well that's quite an important point because a lot of people when they first go into work, I mean, it can be quite daunting to just pick up the phone and speak to someone you've never spoken to before. You guys in the chat, like, have you had any experience with that so far in terms of like just picking up the phone and just ringing someone that you've never spoken to before about something, not necessarily in a business setting, but just in general? Because I think it's quite a daunting thing that you don't really think about when you first go into work. Like the fact that you have to just kind of like, especially if you're cold calling someone about something, that is really not a good situation to get yourself into. But ultimately, if it's part of your job, it's part of your job, and you just got to
Mm-hmm.
get used to it. And you
Yeah.
know, if you just throw yourself out there, you do get a lot better at it over time. It's not just a case of, oh, like, hi, how are you? You kind of develop in how you conduct yourself in those things. So yeah, like you guys that are in the chat, I'm quite interested to see whether you've ever had to do that so far, or whether that's something that you've still got to learn. Is there anything else that you want to add from your perspective, Emma, in terms of anything else that I've missed?
No, I've just seen Connie's come up. Nothing that I've missed. It is just a case of if people want to work in this sort of area, have a think about what industry they want to work in. Is it a bank? Is it a casino? Is it solicitors, pension company? You know, have a think, and then again get that experience working in that company, and you understand the way things work, and then you can build yourself up from there. So it's definitely a case of having to think about where you want to work and start, you know, working in that company. Even if it's the worst paying job in that company, it's your foot in that door and you will get there with determination.
Absolutely. So yeah, Connie said, I'm doing a part-time job where I've had to speak to people face to face, but using the phone always worries me. It's weird because, you know, you would think that like being face to face with people would be scary, but like there's something about kind of speaking on the phone to people who you've never met before. I think it's because you can't kind of, it's not tangible, you can't see them, that it kind of makes it a bit more daunting. So yeah, it can be a scary thing, but as we're saying, like it's just about getting some experience in it. You know, once you've done a few calls, you'll slowly get used to it.
Yeah, I mean, I found when I worked at Egg and it was on the
Internet.
calls, you'd get a lot more sort of angry customers because they feel, because you're not face to face, they feel they can be a bit more mean to you. Whereas when you have that face to face contact in the branch, in my experience, the customers were a bit nicer to you because people are generally less horrible when you're looking at that person. But yeah, I do agree. I think it is more scary on the phone than it is face to face. And like I said, that first phone call I had was horrible, and I probably made loads of mistakes, and the customer probably thought, "What is she doing?" But you learn and you get there.
You do. And Connie says, I find it hard speaking on the phone because you can't see people's facial expressions.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a struggle in itself, and it's a different set of skills, because like when you're face to face, and I guess it helps with video calls because you can read people's facial expressions and their body language and stuff too. You know, you can tell how they're approaching things, whereas with phone you kind of have to judge purely based on the tone of someone's voice. Because a lot of communication is through non-verbal, it does make it a bit more challenging. So
yeah.
But yeah, as we've been saying, you know, it's just a case of getting some experience.
Saying it's the same when you are emailing colleagues and people, you know, it's that same, like on a telephone, you can't see your facial expression. It's harder because you don't even know the tone of it. So you know, I've learned a lot from written communication, because it's a whole nother way of not knowing how people are taking it. So yeah, you do learn the hard way.
Thank you very much. You can talk to where you are today. It's been really, really useful.
Thank you.
And yeah, well, I'll end the recording here. And if you want to check out Nottingham Building Society, I'll leave some links to their socials and whatnot in the description of this video. Equally, check out our socials and stuff too. There's a playlist on YouTube with all of the different links to all the episodes. Make sure you check them all out so you find out about all the different careers. And we'll hopefully see you in the next one.
And if people go to the Nottingham website, if you look on the hub, there's a whole section on financial crime. So have a good read.